يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم brothers and sisters. One of the things that we find is extremely important for Muslims in this day and age, in this land, where their beliefs and practices are being attacked from different angles. We find that it's pertinent that they have an understanding, an awareness, and a confidence in their religion. This is especially affecting the next generation of Muslims. You know, when you go to school, there's a totally different value set in this society. When it comes to interactions with other people, there's not a problem as a value in this society for men and women to hang out, for kids to have boyfriends and girlfriends. There's not a problem in this society if people are involved in usury and riba in their transactions. But as a Muslim, I have a different set of values that may contradict with this society's values. One way to be able to grapple with this and to deal with this is to go back first and foremost and understand what our role and purpose is in this world. A lot of times our children, our young people are learning the ritual practice of Islam. They're learning that in Muharram we have majlis. They're learning that we make salah. They're learning that Muslims have a place that they go to during the season of Hajj. And they make this pilgrimage. They're learning about ziyarah. They're learning about a lot of the practice of Islam, but sometimes they are missing the most important component, which is the belief of Islam, the belief system, the ideology. What do they believe and what is their purpose? Why should any of that even be important to them? Why should this person, if they don't understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why would he pray to them? A person that doesn't understand the value system of being honest from an Islamic perspective, then why wouldn't they cheat? So we have to start emphasizing or further emphasize these beliefs. Because when the beliefs make sense, then the ahkam part and the practical part, it makes sense. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when His existence makes sense, then praying to Allah makes sense. When understanding the role of the Anbiya and the A'imma, the Prophet and the infallible Imams, when their role and who they are makes sense, then the ziyarah of them makes sense. The visitation of them makes sense. Tawassul and seeking their intercession makes sense. And if we skip that, then we'll miss that. It won't be so strong for us. Let's look at Surah Al-Mulk. In this surah, in this chapter, I believe that's 67. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts into perspective what our purpose is. الذي خلق الموت والحياة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I created death and life. These are realities which I created. Why? He puts that into perspective for us as well. لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ, so that I may test you. Again, why? What is the need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to test us? He explains again in the same ayah, أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, so that I may see, so that we can find which one of you are the best when it comes to your actions and your deeds. You go to school, right? You go to school, you take classes, you take AP classes, all of these things, you go to college to get a degree, all of these things, in that process, after a few years, they don't just say, let's randomly hand out some certificates and degrees. What do they say? Take these tests, write these essays, pass these exams. Afterwards, if you're worthy or your grade is sufficient, then you will qualify for that degree. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that this death and this life, this is a reality and it has a purpose. The hardships and difficulties in life are for a purpose. That purpose is to get you from point A to point B. That purpose is so you can graduate from being at one stage and go to the next stage as a human being. The tests of life. In fact, the tests of life are so important that when we look at the A'imma and the Ma'asumeen, we have some hadith that reflect that the Ma'asumeen loved the tests of life. They embraced the tests and difficulties of life. Someone says to Rasulullah, peace be upon him, he said, mashallah, I have a daughter, she's very good, and she's never ever been sick a day in her life. And Rasulullah says, woe unto your daughter, that she's never been sick. That is one of the ni'mats of Allah through which we grow. If a person never faces difficulty, how will they overcome? How will they gain that? How will they pass the test if they do not take it? Sometimes we have perceptions of qualities that we have. For example, a person may think to themselves, I'm a patient person. But you do not know if you have patience until Allah tests you with something where you must have patience. So the necessity of having some of the virtuous qualities are the tests. It's like you take this test, you get this certification. You are certified one of the Sabirun. You're qualified. You went through the hardships, the difficulties, and you were patient in face of them. You are one of the mutawakkilun. You're one of the people who trusted in Allah instead of others and relied on Him to resolve your problems. Any of these things require the test of this world to be able to achieve the next level. This world is the world of tests. Allah has created death and life so that He may test you. This entire process, this is the world where that test happens. So that we can define who we are. What separates the Ma'asumeen from all other people, what separated Rasulullah, peace be upon him, from all other people was the way that he took his test. Okay? Sometimes people have this perception of Islam where they look at the lives of the Ahlul Bayt, they look at the lives of the Prophet, and they look at them in the wrong way. What do I mean? I mean, they look at their lives as if they are some kind of afsana, some kind of legend, something that is not realistic. Oh, they were ma'soom. Well, that's Imam Ali. He can be ma'soom. I'm just poor little old me. And I'm going to make mistakes. We justify our mistakes before we make them. I can't be like Imam Ali. He's so ma'soom. He's so perfect. And we put them in a category not understanding that the isma and the infallibility, for lack of better translation. I don't like the word infallible translation because of sometimes in English, infallible means someone who is not capable of committing sin or wrong. But the meaning that we have is something more like sinless or saintly. There's someone who does not commit sin, but not because they don't have the choice. Right? We don't believe that Rasulullah or any of the Ma'asumeen, peace be upon them all, that they did not have the choice and ability to commit wrong. We believe that even though these choices and abilities were available to them like every other human being, they always chose to do what was right. Even this sometimes this doesn't fit into our head. They always chose. I remember even hearing from in the interfaith, these Christians, and probably amongst, in the Christian religion, is there arguably no one more revered than Prophet Isa, Jesus, peace be upon him. Other than probably Hazrat Maryam, Mary, the mother of Jesus, peace be upon her. And what the person said really surprised me. They said, is that really possible? You think she didn't do anything wrong? The mother of Prophet Isa. Saying, how could she have a child and no one has touched her? She couldn't really accept this. That someone could be this pure. It was still hard to accept. When we find a lot of examples where people want to believe that our prophets were very, very fallible or they committed wrongs, because this makes it easier to understand. But it's downgrading the human potential. Let me put into perspective how simple it would be and easy to understand and make tangible. What does it mean that a person stays away from sin? What does it mean that a person in every test chooses the right path? Okay? Make it as an example for you. If there was a burning pit in this room, filled with spikes and fire and just roaring and blazing, and I told you, you have a choice to walk in that and sit there, or to sit in this comfortable chair. You would choose to sit in the chair. And if I gave you this choice a second time, you would choose to sit in the chair. And if you had this choice 100 times, you would keep making this decision. Every time, you would keep making this decision. What is the reason for that? You understand the harm of this action. You understand that it's burning your demise. So you would choose the other way. And someone, even for the sake of, imagine even less than that, that's certain. Let's say that someone says there's a probability. There's a probability, there's a storm so bad that's going to come that it's going to wipe out this whole city. If there's a chance that people even evacuate their entire city. Sometimes even for the sake of probability, people make these decisions. Not even understand what would happen if it was certain. So for the person who has understanding of those actions, when they get to that fork in the road and that choice of backbiting or not backbiting, for example, that backbiting looks like that fire every time. So every time they approach this choice, they will always choose the right way, because they have a depth of understanding of this reality. When someone understands that, we have some hadith that say that the backbiter and the one who listens to backbiting, كَلَاهُمَا فِي النَّارِ, both of them enter into hellfire. The person who understands this truly, then when someone begins to talk about something, he says, please don't, I don't even want to go down that road. it becomes so real for him. He wants nothing to do with that. So he stays away. Or someone who understands that it says that the person who you backbit, all of the good deeds that you did now go to that person. The person who truly understands this, why would you do that? If someone said, you press this button, everything you own will go to this person, you would not press that button. If I asked you 100 times, do you want to press the button? Every time you would say no. This is understanding the reality of the sin, the reality of that ma'siyah, of that wrong. It becomes so real, so tangible, that at every junction, you choose to stay away from it. So this is the nature of the isma and the sinlessness or infallibility of the ma'soom. That every time they face that test, they see the beauty of the good and the ugly of the bad. There's hadith about the Mi'raj of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And things that he saw, we started touching on this in Friday prayer, that one of the things that he saw was the people who their hands were like plates. And when he asked the angel Jibreel, the archangel Gabriel, who these people are, he explains to him, these people who have hands as plates, and on one side is everything that is disgusting and putrid and foul that no human being would ever eat. And on the other side is all that is beautiful, the most delicious food that you can have. I was teaching this to some young people. I said, what do you imagine that was? And they said, pizza. That's lots of pizza on that hand. I said, well, okay, pizza. Whatever you think is the most delicious, best thing that could possibly be. But these people would constantly eat that which was disgusting and foul. They would look at both, and they would eat the thing which no human being would eat. Why? He says, it's explained to the Prophet that these are the people of your ummah who had the choice to eat halal, but they kept eating haram food. It showed some people who their brain, their skull was being crushed, and their brains were oozing out. He said, who are these people who are suffering this kind of punishment? It says, these are the people that at night they would not pray. They go to sleep, they forget about their prayers. I'm tired. It showed the people, it said their mouths were like that of camels, and they would cut their lips and eat them. So these were the backbiters of your ummah. So when these sins and these actions take on a reality for us, when we see them, we see this, we learn to stay away from it. Now this means that this isma and this sinlessness of the Messenger of Allah and the Ahlul Bayt is not limited to them. It is an example for all of us to follow. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. And the Messenger of Allah is the perfect exemplar, the perfect example for you to follow. Because people would say, if there was no choice in this action, they would say, we would say, the Prophet was an angel. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not send an angel to reveal the Quran, or to be the messenger rather. Because we would say, that's an angel, it's perfect, he can't commit these things. We're different. Even with the understanding of the infallibility of the Prophet and the Imams, we still say that to some degree. So we have to put into perspective that the level of choice makes a big difference in the path that we choose for ourselves in this world. Now, I want to tell you a story about a great scholar. May Allah have mercy on his soul. Ayatollah Bahjat. May Allah have mercy on his soul. If you don't know about him, if you read about him or Google or search some things, you should find a lot of information which talks about how pious he was. He was known for his worship, his taqwa, his phenomenal karamat, phenomenal acts. This way that he would inspire people through that. He was a person who, as we know, between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in some irfani interpretations, there are veils, layers of hijab between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes we do things, good deeds, and we remove some of these layers and these veils. You know, in another way, it's an analogy to how hijab itself is. That hijab is something that a woman wears, for example, that protects her and safeguards her image from those who are strangers. But for the person who is close, then they can see this person unveiled. We have a duty or a goal of achieving proximity to Allah. Taqarrub ila Allah in every action. And so what that means is that every time I do certain actions which bring me closer to Allah, more layers of this hijab and barrier are removed. So this is the concept and the idea of intimacy with Allah, or this nearness to Allah, or coming closer to Allah. A group of students or a group of people that came from the States, most of them, they had an opportunity to ask Ayatollah Bahjat some questions. And I was there as a translator. They were on a tour going to Ziyarat in Iran, Qom, Mashhad, and a few other places they visited. And after he prayed, he would sit and usually answer a few questions. So first in his prayer, it was unlike almost any other person who experienced the prayer behind. That the intensity, even in his pronunciation, was so much because of his crying all throughout his prayer. He would weep all throughout his prayer from beginning to end. Like he understood something in that salah, in that moment where we call the mi'raj of the mu'min, the ascension of the believer, that sometimes we fail to understand and experience. And almost every single prayer of his was like that. You know, actually in one of his quotes that he says that if the Salatin and the rulers of the world, if the kings and presidents of this world, if they had the slightest idea of what the pleasures of Salat are, they would not seek anything else. They have no idea about, not the thawab, not the benefit, the pleasures that are in Salah. And so he would pray in this fashion. After the Salat, we came, we sat, they were asking questions. One of the things that was asked or explained was that we live in America. We live in this land where, as we began the discussion, the value system is not always the value system of Islam. So we have these challenges that we face and these difficulties. What can we do in order to achieve high levels of spirituality, How can we become, asking someone who has walked that path and is an example of that spirituality, how can we get there? And he, understanding that we're facing so much difficulty, he gave 2 pieces of advice in order for us to do that here in America. And the first thing that he said was, Gunah nakum. Gunah nakum. Don't commit sin. Don't commit sin. He said, every time you commit a sin, you take 1,000 steps backwards. So think about this. There's these layers of hijab between us and Allah. And we remove them. We make salat on time, we remove so many. We attend the majlis of the Ahlul Bayt, we remove so many. We get closer and closer to Allah. We give sadaqah and charity, we remove so many. And we make salatul layl, we remove so many. Reading Quran in the month of Ramadan, we're moving so quickly. Laylatul Qadr, on that night, that's khayrun min alf shahr, better than 1,000 months. We stay up, we do ibadah, and we worship, and we get so close. But then, we commit one sin. We listen to that backbiting. We look at something we should not. We make an accusation of a believer. We take something that we shouldn't. And all of a sudden we're going back to the beginning. And it's as if all of this hijab returns. Imagine climbing a ladder and then going back to the bottom. So what happens to many of us, many a time, is that we're like a hamster on a wheel, where we're running and we're making a lot of movement, we're doing a lot of things, but we're not making progress and moving forward. If I told you that you have to run a marathon from Baltimore all the way to somewhere in Virginia, you have to run this marathon. There's a great reward, the greatest reward you can ever imagine. It's $1 billion sitting there, you just have to run from here to there. Well, you probably start trying to make that effort. Now, what if you constantly, after you got to the middle, you kept coming back to the beginning? You'd make halfway, and then I'd say, okay, you come back to Baltimore, start again. You keep running, and then you start back again. You keep going, but then you go back to the beginning. This would seem like insanity, actually. This is exactly what it looks like when we commit sin. The reality is that the reason why when we see the examples of Ayatollah Baghdad, we're so in awe, is because the reality of every human being reaching that potential is almost foreign for us, because we constantly are going back and forth, and we don't usually get to experience what it means to come close or to cross the finish line. The real success for us is to get to that point. This is the reason why self-purification and tazkiyah and purification of our soul, our ego, and staying away from any sin is the most important work that we must do in this world. It's so important that, in Arabic language, when you want to emphasize something, sometimes you swear by something. Like sometimes we might say, Wallahi, the Khuda, I swear this is true. We want to emphasize that something is true. I remember we used to catch cabs in Iran when we were in the Hausa, and oftentimes when people see you and they think, well, you must be a foreigner, or maybe sometimes some people, they think, well, you must have a little bit more money. You have dollar. right? And sometimes they would charge you more according to how you look. And this this became something that, people would try to avoid because of that. They would run into this kind of problem or this kind of situation where they felt that they were being treated a little bit differently in these situations. Where someone would look at them and say that, no, maybe you have a little bit more, you can do a little bit more. I'll come back to that point in a minute. At any rate, when we're talking about this concept of spirituality and this concept of tazkiyah, this concept of self-purification, when we look at the examples of the Quran, there are a lot of lessons there for us to learn. And I said in Arabic language, swearing is one of the ways to emphasize something. I swear by something. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by different things to put emphasis on that. So this cab driver would, sometimes swear, Bijuna Zata Abbas, Bijuna, that all of the different imams and ayman that I swear by this imam, I swear by Bijuna Imam, this is the price, don't worry about it. And things like that to try to create confidence in you because, you trust the imam. Sometimes some people are not completely honest still about that. But the idea, though, is that when someone swears, it should mean that they're being very, very serious about an issue. We look at Surah Al-Shams. Right? In this surah, the most places where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sworn consecutively are in these ayats. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَّاهَا وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا. Over and over and over and over again, he swears by the sun, by the night, by the moon, and so on and so forth, by the sky. Why is Allah making all of these swears by all of His magnificent creations? It is to put emphasis on one thing. And that is what He says after all of that. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. The person who purifies their self and their soul in this world, that person will be successful. The entire success in this world is based upon the process of purification that they go through in this world. Meaning every time they have this test, they pass the test. So this is why you find Arafah welcome their test. One of the students came to their teacher. He was an Arif. He said, I'm going through so much family problems. And I keep going through these difficulties. I'm trying my best. Why? His teacher said, Allah loves you very much. And so He gives you more tests, more opportunities to reach a higher position. Here's another test to reach a higher degree. This is what we call true spirituality. I'll close with this story. And actually, I should point out that right now there's this movement where spirituality is a kind of word that's being thrown around to mean pretty much anything. I remember many years ago, not very long ago, 5-10 years ago, there was a poll or a study that showed that in America, that people were very inclined to certain religions that were on the rise. And those religions were, at that time, Islam, specifically Sufism, Buddhism, and witchcraft. Why were these the three trending religions for Americans? This is because of the perceived spirituality that is a part of that. So, in this secular world where there's so much emphasis on everything material, separation of church and state, and this kind of religion is just something where you feel good on a weekday, on a 1 day a week, and then you go about your life. When there's this kind of less influential aspect of religion in terms of your growth as a human being, then it leaves much to be desired. And you start to look for the aspects which are less talked about, those aspects of the things which are not seen, the unseen world, or things of this nature. And even in this instance where these are things which are misguided, people are attracted to that. Everything that is considered metaphysical or supernatural is not necessarily divine. It's not necessarily from Allah. So people with pseudo-supernatural abilities or inclinations or research or knowledge are attracting people in this manner with this kind of things, with this kind of information. But it does not mean that it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what's important. In fact, once there was an interfaith event where I met this young lady. She was about 19 years old, Caucasian girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, and she said, we're talking about our faith and our background. She said, I am a Satanist. I'm a shaitan parast. And so, of course, I was a little shocked, because that's not something that you hear every day. Hi, I'm a Satan. Oh, that was a little surprising. But then she wanted to explain what Satanism was. And what she said was interesting. She said, oh, Satanism isn't what you think it is. I said, what do you mean? She said, we don't worship some guy with horns. She said, Satanism is about spirituality. It's about being your own deity. I do what I want. I follow myself. So the biggest sin which, this grave sin which Shaitan commits, of that arrogance in face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of not being obedient, is what in this religion, and this so-called religion, has convinced people to also replicate by saying that they are basically worshiping themselves in the name of spirituality. So we don't want to confuse the beautiful teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and true spirituality with these pseudo and phony versions of spirituality, which cannot even be called spirituality. In true spirituality is the practice which purifies your soul and purifies your nafs and makes a person conquer his ego. And sometimes people get that confused with this superficial concept of spirituality. Whereas, for example, they think that they're more spiritual by reciting more dua, but then when it comes to halal and haram, sometimes they commit haram. That's not spirituality. They think that's more spiritual if their majlis is longer, but a week later they commit some sin. That's the opposite of spirituality. It impedes your spirituality. Spirituality is not 1,000 rakats. Spirituality is coming between that backbiting and choosing not to. Making salat or sleeping and choosing to get up and pray. That is the essence of what spirituality is. And we have many opportunities in this land because of the many tests. The last point that I will mention is what Ayatollah Jawadi Amali, may Allah give him long life, mentioned in one of his classes, where he said it was in a tafsir of, I believe it was Surah Nahl at the time. And he said shaitan can be the cause of you achieving greater perfection. Why? Because the same test that someone else may have, because he makes it more difficult for you, you have greater opportunity to succeed or to go higher. For someone making salat on time in a Muslim country where everyone is making salat, where everyone is praying, is not as difficult as someone who's here in America, who's working, and everyone is busy, and at that time he steps away and says, I want to make salat at this time. So there's a greater reward for the person in this country who's able to maintain their spirituality. There's an opportunity surrounded by these difficulties, which gives us a harder test, but also allows us to achieve more, inshallah. May Allah give us all the tawfiq and success to understand its realities and teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and to follow them in every aspect of our life, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.